Hey YouTube, this is Faith of Raven Repair Co. making a small video on how to set up Looking Glass if you've already set up a KVM. This guide assumes that you followed my last tutorial and that you're trying to run your virtual machine on one display. And this tutorial, the way I'm showing it, is basically kind of specific to like Arch and Antergos-based distributions. Although you can modify the steps to fit your own distribution, a lot of this will be distribution agnostic. It mostly relies on you using virt-manager, basically. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to download Looking Glass either from the GitHub or from the AUR on Arch Linux. I'm going to download it from the AUR. I will say as a footnote, I generally don't suggest using AUR helpers, but because I'm making this tutorial as simple as possible, I will show you an example of an AUR helper. If you don't already have one, I would suggest yay, so you'll just want to type sudo pacman s yay, enter your password. I already have this installed, so I don't need to install it, but you'll just want to install that. And then with yay, the sentence structure will be exactly the same as it is with pacman. And with this, you're going to want to install Looking Glass. So you'll want to type yay -s looking-glass. And so this, I don't need to read the diffs. Hold on, let me see. Yes, clean build all of those. Don't show diffs because I just don't care. It'll start downloading, cleaning up, blah 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 blah, and it'll start compiling. And there we go. Now we have the Looking Glass client installed. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add something to your, you're going to want to use virt-edit to edit something in your virtual machine's configuration file. So for me, my virtual station name is lane station, so I type sudo virt-edit lane station. Sorry, not virt, virsh. And you'll want to scroll all the way down, and there's this command right here. So this is not a one-size-fits-all command. I will copy and paste it in the description for an example, because you do have to do a mathematical calculation to figure out what number to put here. I put 32 because my resolution is 1920 by 1080. I'll show you in this Firefox tab here. Here's the calculation that you have to do. I'll also post this in the description. So basically with this, I ended up doing 32 megabytes because, as you can see in the example here, 1920 by 1080 ends up being rounded. When this calculation is done and rounded to the nearest power of 2, you get 32 megabytes. So that's where I have that set. If your resolution is higher, you'll have to do that calculation differently, or lower, either or. And after you've done that, you're going to want to type in these commands. You'll want to be in sudo for this so that the commands can be made. Don't try to do this in just your normal user account unless you've made it as close to root privileges as possible. And you'll want to set up a script for this, which I'll just post a description on how to make a script for it because I don't want to show it in the video. But you'll have to do this basically every single time you restart your computer, so it's best to make a systemctl script for it. Alright, so after you do this, you're going to want to boot into your virtual machine. And now we're ready for a final step, which is installing all the necessary Windows software. So, you'll want to go back to the Looking Glass host vision site. You'll want to middle click or right click the download button there. You'll want to go to Quick Start Guide, and in Quick Start Guide you'll want to go to Configuring Windows. You'll want to right click this and download the latest virt.io driver for the IVSHMEM driver. And what that is it's basically like a shared memory file driver that lets the virtual machine pass through some of the RAM of the it's basically like a shared RAM type situation where the Windows side of the memory will output one thing, and the Linux side of things accepts that as an input. Sorry that wasn't the greatest explanation. I'm running on not a lot of sleep. So anyway, you want to go to releases. You'll want to download, what do you get here? LookingGlassHost.exe. I already have this downloaded, so I'm not going to go download it. And you'll want to download virt-io win10 pre-whql 0.1161.zip. You need specifically 161. You can't use 146. That is very outdated, and you will not have the correct IVSHMEM driver. So, the first thing we're going to do is move Looking Glass to a destination of our choice. So, what I personally would do is I would move it into my Documents folder. So you'd go to your Downloads, you'd find Looking Glass, you'd move it to your Documents, make a folder called Looking Glass, and then put LookingGlassHost.exe in there. And to have this loaded boot so that you don't have to manually load this exe every single time, so you can permanently have a headless display or like a single display using this method, you'll want to edit this this registration key here. So you'll want to open up regedit. You'll want to go to, I'll close all of this so I can show you exactly how to get there, because I know regedit can be confusing for a lot of people. So you want to click HKey local machine, then software, then Microsoft, then Windows, then run, and you'll see a list of things here. Probably there might be nothing, depends on your installation. You want to right click, select new, select string value, and when you do that you'll get this exact menu. For value name, I'd recommend putting it as Looking Glass so you remember what it is, and for value data you put the exact folder and the exact file name of where you put it. So because of the fact that I put it in my Documents folder and I'm using my account Lane, which is my middle name, you'll want to put C user, your username here, Documents, Looking Glass, LookingGlassHost.exe. And what this does is this ensures that every time you log in, Looking Glass loads up immediately, so you can immediately go to using Looking Glass on your Linux client, on your Linux host, sorry. So after you've done that, IVSHMEM drivers should be done downloading, because I wrote 96 megs, and then the Fedora server can be kind of slow sometimes. So you'll want to extract it, so you'll want to go back to your downloads. You want to open up the RAR here. You want to extract whatever your corresponding Windows version is. I'm using Windows 10, so I drag and drop it here. I'm not going to do that because, again, I've already extracted it. Then you want to open up Device Manager. Once you're in Device Manager, you want to go to Show Hidden Files. You'll want to go to System Devices. There will be something named something like PCI RAM controller or something along the lines. It'll be the only thing in here that has both the words PCI and RAM in it. Right now mine is currently replaced with the actual correct driver for Looking Glass. Or Looking Glass compatibility, or IVSHMEM compatibility in general, which Looking Glass uses. So when you find this PCI RAM controller file, or whatever it's called, you just right click it, update driver, browse my computer for driver software, then in search for drives in this location you want to click browse. It's best to move it to your desktop because then it's easily accessible, like right from here. You want to go to Win10. If you're using an x86 virtual machine, select x86. If you're using an AMD 64 virtual machine, select AMD 64. I would highly recommend using AMD 64. You'll have the best compatibility that way, although if you are limited to older x86 hardware, this may work, but also I'm not sure you can even do KVM if you're stuck with x86. But anyhow, you'll just select that, click next, and it'll install the drivers. And once the drivers are installed, all you need to do is restart. So I'll close all of these things that are open. I will hit shut down. And while I'm shutting down, I'm going to close out of Looking Glass for a second. And yeah, ignore the fact that I'm just screwing around in my terminal while doing this. So I'll go back to my virtual machine. I'll start it again. And while I'm starting it, I'm going to load up Looking Glass while we wait. So because of how Looking Glass works, because it starts when you're logged in, you won't see your boot screen, you won't see your login screen, so I'd recommend not putting a password on your account in the virtual machine. Although if you do, there's a simple workaround around it, because if you have a Spice server open or using evdev pass-through or whatever, just hit space on the blank screen when you assume that you're at the like the lock screen wallpaper thing. Type in your password, hit enter, and then your display should show up. So to use Looking Glass, there isn't like anything in here that'll show you Looking Glass. You have to type it manually as a command. So what I do personally is I type looking-glass-client-s because I don't have a Spice server, and that disables Spice detection and anything to do with Spice through this. And if you want full screen, you type -F. I don't personally want full screen right now. Actually, yes, I do want full screen, so I'm going to leave that there. And I will hit enter. And you'll get this purple thing. And you'll have that for a tiny bit until your operating system has loaded. So I can see on my external display that I'm currently at my login screen. It's currently doing the little spinning thing and saying welcome. But as soon as it's finished logging me in, this whole purple hourglass will turn into my desktop. Let's see. Alright, so there we are. There we go. So it took a couple seconds past actually logging in, but everything shows up. I'm in my Windows virtual machine. I only have one monitor. You can see it's actually not this sluggish on most systems. It's sluggish on my system because I have an external graphics card, and because of the bandwidth limitations, Looking Glass is not a viable option for me. So I personally ordered a capture card, which I'm going to be using as a replacement, which sucks because this is the free and like most viable alternative for anyone using a desktop. But us people with laptops and external graphics cards kind of have to go in a bunch of circles to get stuff like this to work. So I will run a Heaven benchmark though, just to show you, for example, if you were to use this on an eGPU setup, what you'd be getting. But if you're using this on like an actual, desktop or like a GPU that's connected to your laptop already, like a Muxless GPU, you'll get like virtually native performance. Like all desktops will get like closest possible to native performance if they're a relatively modern device. Laptops with built-in graphics cards that don't rely on having another display connected. Look up Muxing and Muxless if you want to learn more about that difference. You'll get acceptable performance, but because of the fact that this PCI lane is already so bottlenecked, I'm not getting a super smooth experience with this. Like you can see that on my end personally, I get a lot of stutters. But when I look at the actual display showing up on my external monitor, I'd say I'm getting like maybe 50 FPS minimum, but generally ranging around 60 FPS at most scenes. But with Looking Glass, I'm getting under half of that. I'm getting maybe a fourth of that performance. You can see the FPS in the corner. This is definitely not 25 FPS. This is closer to 5, I'd like to believe. But that has been how to set up Looking Glass. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, just drop a comment down below. Give this a like and a subscribe if this helped you out. That really keeps me motivated and keeps me doing what I do, because I want to pass all the knowledge I have on this subject and all subjects that I work with to the people because I believe that DIY is definitely the way to go. Doing things like this, breaking free from the chains that is being stuck to proprietary like Microsoft systems and whatnot, and using Windows as a service as it should be allowed to be used for people like us, is just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm getting a phone call. Anyway, this is the end of the video. I hope you all have a pleasant, pleasant day.